What we'll do is we'll start in the usual way. I'll get you to introduce yourselves. Do you want to?
I'm Kyle Lu, I'm founder and CEO of Dapp.com. So we are the largest app distribution and analytic platform. Yeah.
Cool.
I'm Pavel, Bains, CEO, co-founder of Bluzelle. We're decentralized data storage, so projects that are built on the blockchain shouldn't be storing them on the blockchain. They should store because it's too expensive and bulky and slow. Put it on us, we're off-chain storage.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I have it.
Okay, hi guys, my name is Du. I'm in charge of MakerDAO's career lead as well as BDM partnership in Asia. So MakerDAO, we're the largest decentralized stablecoin as well as a lending service. So good to see you guys.
Hey, my name is Shang from Block Party, actually 8 Hours Foundation. We are making a blockchain gaming platform that bringing people together and play and enhance their social fabric.
I'm Keyvan, and I'm the managing director of Salem Partners. We have about $700 million under management in our wealth management division, as well as an investment bank. I'm also the executive chairman of Versus Systems, which has created a platform to integrate rewards and real prizes into game experiences. And I'm also the member of the board of LucidSight, which is a blockchain-based scarcity engine business that's built into a bunch of games in the US.
Cool. So what I want to do is sort of start painting a picture of where we think we are in the scene. I mean, one of the comments that was made earlier on is, if you think about it, blockchain gaming is really only like 3 or 4 years old, whereas the gaming industry itself is only about 30 years old compared to cinema, which is over 100 years old. So, where are we right now? I mean, what do you think is the kind of the best way to summarize the state of where we are? Are we in the kind of early experiment stage? What else do you think is who wants to kick that off?
In terms of games?
Well, in blockchain games, I'm thinking particularly.
Yeah. Oh, I think totally experimental, early base. I came from the game space, worked at Disney, Electronic Arts, Microsoft. So I think it's brand new, scratching the surface, and it's more about what features blockchain can bring into existing games and enhance the gaming experience.
So, I mean, would you say that the CryptoKitties kind of model of, that kind of thing that got people's attention, that collecting method, which arguably not even a game, was just about saying, is blockchain something that could be usable, or was it more than that?
Personally, I think it met a current need of people who were in crypto and needed something to do. I think longer term, I was just talking to a guy I know who runs a game studio in Vancouver, and they just still look at a lot of this stuff as just NFTs, collectibles. They're like, I'm trying to make the next Fortnite. I'm not going for this audience. But I think once they start seeing that the value in the gaming experience can be increased by some of these assets, ownership, trading, then those guys will be like, oh, okay, let's start implementing that.
So, from your point of view, does that meet your expectation, or are we missing something?
Yeah, so that's a really good point, and I do want to note that, like in the beginning, right, even before CryptoKitties, there were games, but most of them were gambling games, right? So you, for example, put Bitcoin, people can do it, right? And then nowadays, so we have collectibles, but we also have many really, for example, games that you can play actually, not just collectible. So I do think there's some kind of, in some way, evolution. But at the same time, there's still a long way to go. That's how I look at it.
For yourself, I mean,
Yeah. So I think blockchain game is still early. Honestly, the user experience is kind of, I'll say, sucks.
You say that? Yeah, I think it's
kind of sucks. You gotta educate people a lot to figure out how you're gonna play games, or if it is really easy game, it's kind of dumb. So, but I mean, we are in the road of getting more and more making sense. If the blockchain game can make as PUBG kind of style, Call of Duty kind of style, I'm sure non-blockchain gamers will super into it because they can play game and earn token, right? It's like a reverse. Right now, you pay money to get even more legitimate hero in the game, but you can't pour the money out, right? But with blockchain, you can actually do both way.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, for me, it's about the economies that's created by blockchain, but in particular, the value transfer from corporate ownership and corporate revenues to individual resale. So the collectability of the NFTs and other things that exist in gaming today, I agree it's experimental, but I think the end of the road is that there will be some real value for a player to actually spend their time and their money in a game, not only just from the enjoyment of doing that activity, but also future economic value of that activity.
But one thing I wonder is there's a lot of games that you arguably are just trying to use blockchain to replace a database, and they're not really making that distributed. Is that still a valuable experiment, though?
I mean, it's valuable insofar as it's another way to validate scarcity, and it's also another way to kind of evaluate data transfer. But the blockchain is actually a fairly inefficient way to do transactional database management, right? It's compute intensive. It's actually fairly cost inefficient when it comes to that kind of activity. So I think it's a misunderstanding fundamentally of what blockchain is capable of. But in the long run, sure, there's absolute store data value in terms of being able to validate an item on the chain that exists forever. And I think that is really valuable. But the early implementations, I 100% agree. It's experimentation. It's kind of trying to figure out what is and is not good on the blockchain, and which chain, frankly, is a good transaction base to actually operate on.
And I think it comes back to your point, Pavel, about that it's finding something to do for the blockchain natives. I think for the game developers, it's slightly different. I think it's like there's a sense that there's, well, arguably, maybe it's not even just a sense of what's possible in the future. You could argue there was a point, particularly around 2017, where there were successful ICOs where it was really, hey, here's a new way to get money without having to give away half my company. So is blockchain as much about raising money still? And what forms would that take? What do you think?
No, I think it create a new way of raising money for company. I mean, it's not as crazy as in 2017.
No.
But it's still way more efficient. I would say I've been through both equity and tokens in the last 3 months.
Equity is not a cheap way to raise money.
Equity, we spent like 6 months. Like we pretty much closed around, but for token, we did it in like 1 month. We raised more.
But increasingly, aren't people making the kind of initial item offering kind of equivalent? And there's lots of acronyms being used for the same principle. But is that? We had Seb talking about Sandbox offering areas of land in the game as something that they would make available for sale, in advance. That seems like a pretty kind of powerful way to generate revenue, but only presumably if you've got an audience who A, understands the game and B, understands blockchain. Is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, so I look at it in two ways. Right? I've seen games that they already have existing game, and then they did some kind of like item sales that like to incentive. To provide incentives for users and engagement with the users, right? Those are very successful. My Crypto Hero did a land sale I think in February. Within a week, they raised they sell a lot of pieces of land, raised around 6,000 Ether, so that's around 500K or almost $1 million, right? And then we also seen a lot of other games that they start with only selling collectibles, NFTs, but like there's no support around that item, so no one actually really care, right? So I think it's like how you already establish the ecosystem matters most on this way of raising.
Yeah, exactly. And Pavel, when we raised this sort of what questions we'd ask, and I'd put ICO as one of them, you said, no, let's not spend any time on that. I mean, and is it really that stark? I mean, it strikes me that I suspect if I understood your argument at the time right, it's like actually what we want is people to invest money in things they understand. And back in the 2017 days, this was a phenomenon of fear of missing out rather than not necessarily understanding what the investment was bringing people. And even arguably, there was a lot of growth in currency, and therefore it was a way of distributing your risk, you could argue. But now it's more about the projects, isn't it? Is that a fair summary, or do you have another view?
I think when it comes to games, it's a good avenue for gaming because if you look at games right now, even not blockchain, like games, they pre-sale items, they crowdfund their products. Friends of mine built MechWarrior, and that's how they did part of it. Was they had development money, and then they pre-sold packs, and that helped fund it and got it. Here, this is something people can understand. So it's actually a good model for games because I guess the main thing is what kind of user they're attracting. Because you're probably not the guys who are doing the like MechWarrior. They want to play. They love MechWarrior. They want to play the game. Here, it's not really about the game. It's about the asset and trading. But it's a good. I mean, the model's the same.
Yeah. Well, Reality Clash was very successful as an ICO, but it sold through different people. It was mostly people who loved the idea of having digital guns to sell. Whether they got to use them or not was almost secondary. So I think you're right. It's about understanding the whatever method we're using to generate revenue. If we're using blockchain as a revenue source, it's about understanding what they care about and finding the right way to deliver that. Is that? I mean,
yeah, I think so.
Cool. So. Do you have any kind of particular views on that, or is there, or are we spending too much time wondering about money?
Oh yeah. So I just want to add an interesting point, and that is that. So one of the benefits of ICO is that it really helps to grow your community.
Yeah.
So for example, like MakerDAO, we actually never done public ICO, which can be good, but that also means that there are not many investors who are like interested in what's happening in some way, right? So I think that, I mean, there are some game companies that do both ICO as well as like sale of their like skins and others. But I think that ICO, it might die in some way, but at the same time, it's also a good way to bring like many different community members.
But if it's not necessarily an ICO, is it that the blockchain is actually becoming an interesting thing for investors in its own stead, and the fact that we understand the potential of blockchain and how we can then apply it in our games, maybe is that more important than the actual kind of tokens we might create?
Yeah, I think that it's a question that's a little bit different, right? So I mean, there are some ICO that's, I mean, the thing is that there are different kind of tokens. There are some tokens that are looking more from like investors can get some return from it, so they might have some kind of burn system within the game, or sometimes they just use it for fee reduction, right? So like transaction fee, things like that. So its token is different, but I do think that having ICO is like you can have it both, right? They're not mutually exclusive to make it like bring more revenue and also value to investors and also players.
So Shane, do you have any kind of views on the kind of using, is the value of blockchain in terms of fundraising for your project?
I'm honestly, I'm thinking like for ICOs, a lot of projects before, the reason why they raise money is like they want to get a return. Either project or investors, they want to get quick return, 10x, 20x, 100x, right? But right now, since the market went down and then slowly went up, a lot of projects die, which is good because they never do things,
because
right?
they were never going to get there, were they?
But now, if any project can raise money, that means they are doing real stuff, right? Because, for example, like, the Facebook Libra, right? There was a hearing yesterday, one of the governors saying, like, what's the difference between Bitcoin and shitcoin, right? All these people, like, laugh, right? Because they don't understand, right? Because a lot of ICO projects not doing anything, right? All they want is actually return. But right now, I'm seeing a lot of projects actually doing real stuff and have amazing ICO for like investment and growing a lot of community. So I'm thinking, it's getting there. ICO is becoming more and more, legit instead of just getting like raising money.
So Kevin, what do you think about this?
As an investor, we've thought about ICOs in a bunch of different ways. There's kind of a divide in our community from ICOs really being a tool for more of the general public to start thinking about how they, at least on some level, increase their communities and build some pool of assets and money that they couldn't otherwise raise.
Beats Kickstarter, I guess.
Correct. Yeah. It's in effect, yes. Right. There's still a lot of regulatory issues around ICOs, right? Depending on which territory you're trying to do them in. We predominantly invest out of the U.S., and so when we look at it, we've shied away from the ICO concept. Frankly, from a regulatory issue standpoint, it's a little too uncertain. But from a game developer standpoint, I actually like the idea of asset sales more than I do ICOs because those are tied to direct game assets and value. And I think the kind of user that you attract is the kind of user that will more likely be your whales, right? It's the people that actually care about the game on some level deeper than just having a token that they might be able to resell later.
Is that true though? I mean, this is an interesting question. I mean, I don't know. It's a genuine question. Yeah. Are people who invest in that item offering, are they going to be the players or are they going to be the flippers?
They may not be the players, but they're definitely the underpinnings of an economy, right? Yeah. So if you think about what happened to Second Life 20 years ago now, when we think when they were doing exactly the same thing, frankly. Exactly. The early buyers of the islands and the lands became effectively the real estate holders of that world, and they created their own economies, right? They brought concerts, they brought things that made their islands more valuable. And so if I think about like what Seb's doing, for example, with the land sales and Sandbox, that could in another way be a same kind of mechanism, right? Where the more assets you hold in a game, the more incented you are to have that game have value. And so while you might not be a player, you're certainly an advocate.
Oh, definitely, and I think it's funny to think about, something that was I first became aware of because of Second Life, now being almost business as usual, which is kind of weird. Anyway, so let's sort of move on to sort of the theme a little bit, and I'm thinking more, actually, given that you mentioned Libra, let's talk a little bit about what that means in terms of, and not just Facebook and the way that Libra seems to be changing at least their search criteria, which is kind of fun, but also, where the other big players, the Apples, the Googles, and the whatever. What do you think the mainstream attitudes are? Are they improving? Is Libra kind of a flag saying this is going to be okay, or is actually Libra a warning that they're going to want to take ownership of this kind of space? What do you think?
Yeah, I think like so the what's from my point of view, what's the most important to blockchain games or the crypto space attention? Like you've seen like every project try to do whatever they need to do to draw attention. Look at my idol Justin Sun, right? Like he go to the Warren Buffett dinner and all that just to draw attention. You see people like have arguments every day and all that. So no matter what Libra would be turning into, I think the most important is it draws a lot of attention to the crypto space, and that's the attentions that all those kind of application, all those experiments need to be success, at least for the first step.
It's kind of, we need fire to kind of make people aware of what's out there. Is that what you think?
Yeah, along with that, I think it was totally brought attention. I look at a good case would be my father-in-law, who's followed crypto from the sidelines for the last few years, never bought anything, and then Libra came back to attention. He's like, oh, Facebook's doing this. Then he looked back at Bitcoin, and he asked me, should I get some, right? And he's 70. And I said, well, yeah. If you're okay with buying it and just holding it for the next couple of years and don't look at the daily price or any of that, you'll be all right. And he said, so what he saw was like Libra got attention, and even though the downturn over the last year and a half, Bitcoin never died. So it just came back. So he's like, okay, this seems safe enough for me now. And he bought it at 10,000, and he was okay.
But that's the thing, isn't it? We had that pretty awful year, and obviously all of the cryptos were affected by that. But it seems to be at least, it's up and down still, but it didn't disappear entirely, like you say. And I think that fact that it, all the doom and gloom, all the kind of the Dapp-com bust parallels that people were talking about were essentially true if you think about the Dapp-com bust as being the start of the internet as a serious business platform. And I think that's how I feel about last year in particular, personally.
I'm trying to wrap my head around this because there are a bunch of us that bought Bitcoin early. Like I bought Bitcoin in the single dollars, like a long time ago, but I haven't sold any, right? And so there's a lot of us that have a lot of Bitcoins that, regardless of what's happening, we're not selling, and so it's not cratering the economies. And I'm wondering if that's actually artificially holding a kind of floor below which cryptocurrencies can't fall, because Bitcoin is such the bellwether for all other cryptocurrencies and all other blockchain initiatives that, there's enough of us that don't really look at our Bitcoin assets as things we just want to make money off of and sell, that I can't wrap my head around. I'm curious what you guys think, because I can't wrap my head around whether or not there's just this artificial floor and we're not actually seeing market economies. What we're seeing is in some effect, an asset that's held up by the fact that a significant percentage of the holdings are never going to transact.
Sounds almost like a collector economy, not a market economy.
Yeah, I got it because I live in the Silicon Valley area, and it was the thing to buy when you could buy bitcoins for 100 bitcoins bought you a pizza back then.
It sounds
right,
like,
which sounds insane because that's like the most expensive
it sounds
pizza
like
ever.
a fashion thing.
It was just a thing, and so we went in and bought a bunch when it was in that tiny pool of like unknown.
What do you think of that? I mean, does that fit your experience?
Yeah. So I mean, I never got to buy Bitcoin when it was cheap, so I'm very jealous of it. I do want to comment on Libra and also how a lot of mainstream companies are getting into blockchain. I think that we can also probably talk from Korea as well, since I'm from Korea. Like big companies like Kakao, they have a Clayton that's also blockchain. Samsung also created a blockchain phone. It's clearly that a lot of mainstream companies are getting into blockchain, but do they actually understand blockchain? I think the question is questionable in a way because, for example, there was a Korean company called Hyundai. They created a coin called H-Stock. The coin didn't do too well, partly because they didn't actually understand blockchain. They just did it because it was really hot and they want to make money and things like that. So I think that if you look at the mainstream right now, I think we need to ask them like, do they really understand blockchain, or are they doing it because like somebody just told them to do it, kind of thing? And then when I look at Libra, it's clear that they spend a lot of time with it, but at the same time, considering that they're getting a lot of legal trouble, I think that there's also a limit to how much like these mainstream companies can handle. Like even in Korea, like Clayton, they also got in trouble with the government as well for their game. So I think it kind of shows that even mainstream companies, they are not prepared for potential like legal issues with the government.
Yeah, the knock-on effects of the behaviours that then get exposed other issues in their underlying company. Maybe is that fair?
Yeah, I think that it also maybe shows like, I mean, if you think about blockchain, it's really new. So I think that if you see a mainstream company getting into blockchain, but like really failing, I think kind of shows that maybe they didn't understand it fully. Like maybe they want to get in because it was so hot and like they think it's a trend. But I mean, that's also true for internet as well. Like, I mean, if you look at a lot of advanced technology, there are companies that might be like, oh, this is a new future, let's create a division for it, but they might not actually understand it, or they might not understand that whether it's profitable, things like that.
So, Shane, what do you think? I mean, I think there's something between these two threads, this idea of are the mainstream companies actually understanding versus do we even understand what this market is? I think, are we dealing with the fact that this is still so new that we haven't even defined for ourselves what this market is and therefore how we best use it?
I do agree. Like sometimes we got confused it as well. For Libra, I think Libra is one of the biggest application for blockchain. Period, because they have hundreds of millions users, right? And all these blockchain project right now, they don't have a lot of users. People trying to get in, but they don't understand. Libra can be a next thing that people can understand very easily. But of course, the reason why government wanna challenge Libra is because government have their own economy, right? Facebook is literally like challenging all these banking. Because if they are
most countries,
they can be a country. Like they can have their own token. All the people are using it. They can really just skip a cash and then just use it Facebook, right?
Who needs to pay taxes?
You don't have to pay taxes. Exactly. So
well, you do actually have to pay taxes.
So that's why they got a lot of challenge, But for the future, I still think Facebook is the one of the biggest blockchain application. Yeah.
So, I mean, I think basically building on what you're saying earlier and what Shane's just said, I think, is it that Libra and things like that are starting to show that there is a movement towards scale, a movement towards audience? I don't think we're there yet, but is that a movement towards legitimacy of this kind of metaphor of how we connect data, how we secure things, how we buy things? Or is it simpler than that? Is it just that everyone's fumbling in the dark and we're starting to see the first ends of the tunnel about where we might end up with this? What do you think?
Me?
Sure.
Yeah.
I think it's more the latter than the former. It's still, I actually 100% agree. I mean, given just the user base that exists within Libra and what Facebook's trying to do, there's at least a reason for people to look at it. But we all have to remember, this isn't the first time that a virtual currency has been tried even within Facebook, right? And so from a general audience standpoint, the general audience still believes cryptocurrencies are fungible assets, not a way to do transactions, right? They look at them as almost like a value store mechanism, right? Your example is perfect. Should I buy it at 10,000 because maybe it's 100,000 in 5 years? That's not how you think about money, right? You don't think, oh, I have 100 US dollars with foreign transaction rates. Will that 100 US dollars now be worth 300 pounds someday because of Brexit? Like, no one thinks about that with money.
Well, I do.
Well,
I'm British.
I would say you might want to. But the macro point is that cryptocurrencies, and I separate the two. Blockchain is very different from cryptocurrency, right? Cryptocurrencies are still looked at by the general population as an asset of value storage. That's not the same thing as, oh, I'm going to go buy a pizza with Libra coins, right? It's very different. And so the flip side, though, is it's great for blockchain, right? Because it means that you now have a massive company. Amazon was the same. That's where I just was. Like, you now have massive companies looking at how blockchain can support transaction ecosystems and what it means to have distributed ledgers of information, what it might mean from things like governance and security and all of the things that we know blockchain is really great to do. And so the experimentation has teeth behind it, right? There's weight behind it. But I still don't know how to wrap my head around what the general consumer thinks and what that's going to mean from an ecosystem for all of us, right? In games or otherwise.
Well, I think that's a fairly good summary, actually. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, that is the issue we have in terms of the existential nature of where we are. I want to twist it a little bit now to something a little bit kind of more practical in terms of the doing of releasing games and doing that. One of the things that came up earlier today was the kind of idea of interoperability of tokenized assets. And there was a question in the audience that basically said, does it even matter? And I'd be really interested to know, to help us kind of understand the wider scheme of what's going on. I think it's quite an interesting decision point about what we want blockchain to be in games. So is blockchain something which is essentially decentralized and therefore every use of it in games should be decentralized? Or is it something that is a toolkit to be used whatever the game needs? And where do you think that might lie? I mean, Carl, do you have any particular kind of views on that?
Me personally, it would be about. Sorry, you can go ahead.
We'll switch back.
For me personally, I think it'd be about gaming experience. Like, does it enhance my gaming experience? Like, fact that it's decentralized and all that. Why, as a user, why does anybody care? I think we just come to the facts that certain things, the ideological principle, doesn't matter. Like, we're finding that with our own product, like as a database. Like, we go to companies that, hey, it's privacy and nobody can tamper into it. They're like, when we go, hey, it's simple to implement, it's multi-region support, flat pricing, okay. Yeah. Like, so the ideology didn't matter. So I think for me, in a game, if the game experience improves because of I can transact assets, change it to somebody, upgrade it, or modify it and sell it to somebody else and I get a royalty, hey, that's a cool player experience.
I totally agree with what Pavel said. I think it depends on the need. I look at it in a few point of view. First one is when like the reason why we were doing like Dapp and we have all those buzzword like blockchain games and all that, right? So essentially it's a game, but the reason why you put blockchain there is because you need that attention, right? It's like when cloud computing and AI were introduced, right? Everyone start talking about them, right? And then you let people know, okay, I have some kind of feature there. Yeah. Come and take a look. Come and give it a try, right? And then that's where people try it. Maybe they don't like it. Like in 2017, when people built those like rock paper scissors games and all that on Ethereum, right? It takes too long to wait for the game result to be released. But right now, and then people saw, oh, there's an opportunity for us to build something on the Ethereum blockchain and make money from there, or maybe like improve a certain way that is proven fair, right? So then, and it pushed us to the next level and people start building like sidechain, right, and other scalable blockchain solutions. So it helps. That
seeding the next thing, next thing, and then
you keep pushing for them to build the new things, right?
So, Duan, do you have any thoughts on this?
I will skip this time.
Oh, okay. Go for it.
Okay, so what I'm excited about is when we start talking about the outcomes that are possible because it's blockchain enabled, rather than saying, to your point, it has blockchain in it, so isn't that cool? What I specifically mean, so when I was at Warner Brothers, we experimented with taking an asset from our first Arkham game into a mobile Arkham game into our second Arkham game. And it was insanely difficult to actually have it transfer across those platforms and have the character base and all the information flow. Blockchain's awesome for that, right? I mean, and so what I'm excited to hear is a game that talks about being able to level up a character in this universe and then take that character into another universe and do other things with that character. Now that all that investment as a player that you make into games like Final Fantasy in the RPG side, or into character builders like the fashion apps are, or into runners where you're trying to make the runner the cool, like that starts to accrete value back to the user, and that's what I'm really excited to start hearing as a marketing pitch, as opposed to just, hey, it's got blockchain, isn't that amazing?
I have the same thing about, particularly about narrative. I want to make NPCs that are smart contracts, that they can be taken into other games, and how people interact with them changes their personality. I think that would be amazing. But why do I want to do that? Because I think it would be really cool. Not because there's any particular kind of philosophical basis upon that. So we don't have a huge amount of time, unfortunately. We always run out of time on the future panel to talk about the future. So let's do that now. What's the one thing you're looking forward to most? And what is the thing you're scared about will stop us getting there?
I really want to see the multiverse scene on blockchain. I mean, there are people who try to do it, but seems like they fail to do it, right? Because when they're CryptoKitties and they're already like people using CryptoKitties to build around that, they call it Kittyverse, right? People try it, but it failed, right? And then people also try to steal CryptoKitty and turn it into their games, right? But I still believe that is worth trying. The most thing that I fear about is people stop doing that, right? Because I know that we can get there.
I want to take my hat into every game and it get more powerful.
Yeah.
What's the thing you look forward to and what you're worried about?
In general?
For blockchain games.
Blockchain games. I think the ability that, hey, if I'm a good player, like you said, going to your thing, if I created something, it's a value. I sold it to Kyle here. He modified it, and sold it to Daewoo, and then just going. Then he got paid, and I got paid all the way. So the digital rights management of I was the original one. They upped it up, but at least I can still earn from that as a recurring revenue down the line. So it's almost like a royalty stream for life. So I think that would be super exciting. The part that I fear is. And it's for all blockchain projects that we're all working on the tech really well and the supply side, but user adoption. Like, is there going to come to a point where, like, you know what? None of these guys have anything. It's like building like the entire Google suite of products all in 5 years, but never really focus on customer and say, no, I'm just going to keep building the applications. So that's what worries me.
I mean, people are just not asking why should anyone play a cat, Yeah. Go on.
Sure, yeah. So what I'm most excited about is so this is something that we touched on as well, but it's a combination of decentralization as in kind of idea, or as an idea, and also like practical. So blockchain gaming, for example, or decentralized finance is actually making people's lives better. Now what I'm kind of afraid of, or I think this is something that many projects and also many companies are worried about, is a regulatory issue, like a legal issue. And the reason why they're a big deal is even if you're decentralized, you have to be centralized somewhere, right? You might have to have an office, or you have to file tax, or yes, you can be like a McAfee and go to the middle of the ocean, but usually that doesn't work out, right? So you need to be kind of worried about those government things. And we saw so many cases where there was a company with a very interesting idea, they actually changed the word, and then the government said, no, you're not allowed to do that. And then they got in trouble. And then the thing is that once the government does that, they also change the perception of how the public looks at it, right? So that's also connect to users as well. Users might have fun, but they don't want to risk their life or legal standing. So that's something that I'm concerned about. But I'm also optimistic that governments around the world, yes, they want to regulate crypto, but they want to regulate it instead of just banning it, usually at least. Yeah.
So what I'm looking for blockchain game is actually, as you said before, if you're really good on one game, you can transfer a character to next game, right? That's the beauty of blockchain is, right? And that's actually exactly what we're doing right now. Trying to create a character, and if you're really good on one game, you can transfer it to the other game. But what I'm really scared about is, majority of the user was saying that, okay, I'm jumping in first game, but I'm getting really good, right? But what about the people who want to play second game saying that, oh, you're already cheating on the first game, right? What are we going to do with it, right? So we have to figure out the economy behind this to make everyone fair. That's what I'm really scared about.
That's a really good point. I mean, I like that. I like that thought. Yeah, like I said before, I'm excited about the multiverse idea. I'm certainly excited about the idea that the activities that people do in their day-to-day lives accrete back to the entertainment value they get out of their games, right? You think about games like Harry Potter Unite, right? Which the Wizards United game, like the fact that you're walking around the real world, the location-based technical touch points that game involves, you can imagine blockchain being used in other parts of your life to accrete back to a game experience. It makes the game stickier. And hopefully it makes the game more fun, which is, at the end of the day, what ultimately I care about most. My fear is a little bit similar to this, which is we as an industry get lost with how cool the tech is and forget about great game design, right? And forget about the fact that users at the end of the day could care less what it's built in. All they want is something that works quickly, and is fun. And I've seen a lot of blockchain-enabled games where, yeah, to your point, you do an action and you wait for the chain to compute, and it takes like 5, 10, like it takes forever, and you're just like, this is ridiculous. Why am I playing this game? So I do worry about the sexiness of the tech overshadowing the great design work that needs to go behind building games.
Yeah.
I think just to follow the one quick thing of when it comes down to just game experience and not the tech is, so I've got a 7-year-old, and we have the Nintendo Switch, so she's played all the latest games. And then I downloaded NES, the old NES 1986 games on there, because she's got a whole suite. I left her for the day, came back 4 hours later, she was still playing those games. And this is just like Excitebike, Dr. Mario, and to her, it was just like, no, it works well, it was functional, didn't care about graphics, it was just a fun game.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing, isn't it? Is the end-all problem actually still happens with talking to people who are making games outside of blockchain. That forgetting the player is so easy, and realizing the player is not you, so easy. But one thing I think for me personally is that at the bottom line, I want to be able to have things which are mine, and to represent myself. I want to be myself online, and I think blockchain has the potential to make that possible, and for people to recognize me and the values that I have and want to show off. I might want to make that different in every game, and in some ways I'm also frightened of the very fact that I want to be me, because then I can't hide. And sometimes I like to hide. So it'd be really interesting to see how people use data and how the blockchain is exposed to a more wider audience over time. But I'm really worried about is we don't get time to experiment. We end up locked into rigid mechanisms that have worked once, and we just see people copying when there's so much to explore. Anyway, on that note, unless you want to...
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much, guys. So that brings us to a close of this blockchain gaming 2 days.